Does linear phase matter? The answer is most of the time no. Let's start off with a quick example though, and then I'll go into a little bit of why things are the way they are. So in order to get a clear example, here are some drums with, basically no EQing going on. And let's turn off linear phase, right? No linear phase is just regular as it comes as usual. Now I'm going to concoct an example that is very unrealistic for this, but it will be a very clear example, so you'll be able to understand in other situations why you might pick one or the other. So I'm going to give a big boost in the low end, and then I'm going to give an even bigger boost in the low end. So this is, probably not going to do this in real life, but here it is without linear phase on, no linear phase. So a lot of EQs would call this minimum phase because they'll try and do the least amount of phase shift. So we're going to call this minimum phase, and this is what it sounds like. Notice that it still hits, boom, 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 boom. There's no pre-ringing. Now let's turn on linear phase. Here's again minimum phase, linear phase. So linear phase has this pre-ringing effect, and there's a case where it's extremely pronounced, but we had to do some kind of ridiculous things to get it. But you can imagine if we had linear phase on and we're doing stuff with drums, and we might have, some things might start to sound washy in some spots, maybe on particularly big transients. Well, the linear phase may have something to do with that. Now, you might be wondering, why is this the case? And that is a technical question. I actually do have a little bit of experience, but I design filters currently in the S domain, haven't done so much in the digital domain. But basically, when you make a filter, there's this equation you come up with. We call it a transfer function. And this describes how the filtering is going to take place. Like everything you want to know about the filter can pretty much be described by this transfer function. And the transfer function takes things in and spits things out. So there's always going to be happening after, and this is going to cause a phase shift. And depending on the form of your transfer function, you can actually tell what the phase shift is going to look like and what frequencies are going to be affected by the phase shift and all this cool stuff. If you're going to do linear phase, now I haven't studied linear phase filters specifically, so I'm a little bit out of I've not studied this formally or anything. So this is kind of just an educated guess for me at this point. But there is essentially, in order to get the phases back to where they're supposed to be, they simply shift in time that signal back so that the phases line up and will form a line, hence linear phase. And that's why you get the pre-ringing. And now I have done this. You can actually send impulses through and you'll see the pre-ringing coming up, and that's just the shifting that's taking place in order to make sure the phases are linear. Now you might be wondering, why would I want to use linear phase? Well, linear phase is just cool to have. It's honestly, minimum phase is you're pretty used to it. It's going to produce the results that you actually would rather expect because, right, no pre-ringing. But maybe you have some pad sounds or something, or maybe you want the pre-ringing. I've actually taken some examples. For example, I have this bass sound. It's not that big of an example here. It doesn't really matter. But I've got this sound here, and there is a linear phase option. And so I could toggle that on and off and see if I like it. In this case, it's going to make basically no difference. This is going to be the case for a lot of what you're doing, unless you have some sort of a big boost or something, and then you're moving that boost around. You might try out the linear phase. It might produce some washing effect that you really like, that pre-ringing, or you might like it with it off because it'll be a little more crisp. In this case, I have it on. Not really that big of a deal here. Versus nothing really going on. I left it on. I'm going to leave it on just because I've had it on the whole time. But in a lot of cases, it simply isn't going to matter. So that's linear phase. You can make your own decisions about whether or not you like it or want to use it. I would encourage you to try it out. It's always an interesting thing to play with. But in most cases, I would keep it off. It also eats CPU and adds latency. So there's more reasons that are more practical also to not use it, in addition to it doing things that you might not want in most of your cases. If you have some long pads and stuff, it's not going to make really any any difference which one you use. They're gonna sound super similar unless you have like the most sensitive ears on the planet. So, anyways, there's some of that. There are other situations we could bring up, but that's like the big one that you're gonna run into, especially on things like drums. Subscribe and hit that bell icon for future videos, and have a blessed day.